The United States suffered a surge in its poverty rate last year, and among the reasons were the rising cost of living and the country's government removing federal programs that provided aid to families during the pandemic. Sigrid Castañeda has the details.
A new data from the U.S. Census Bureau called the Income, Poverty and Health Insurance Coverage in the United States 2022 revealed Americans' economic challenges. In 2022, a significant 12.4% of the U.S. population lived in poverty, a sharp jump from the 7.8% recorded in 2021. This rise is primarily attributed to skyrocketing inflation, which negated nominal income gains. Median household incomes in the U.S. dropped by 2.3% in 2022, marking the third consecutive year of decline. The poverty threshold for an American family of four rose from $31,453 in 2021 to $34,518 in 2022. Child poverty rates also doubled in 2022. The data showed that the child poverty rate more than doubled from 5.2% in 2021 to 12.4% in 2022. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, it was the biggest change in the child poverty since the agency began tracking the index in 2009. U.S. think tank Center on Budget and Policy Priorities said that the rise in poverty amounted to an increase of 15.3 million Americans living in poverty. Meanwhile, the supplemental poverty measure said that the expanded federal child tax credit in 2022 was the cause of the sharp increase in child poverty. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden blamed Republicans lawmakers, accusing them of blocking the extension of the child tax credit while favoring tax cuts for the wealthy. He pledged to continue fighting for its restoration. Reporting this has been Sigrid Castañeda as the Manay News.
After receiving a warning from the United States, the president of Iran said its government has the authority on how to use $6 billion in frozen funds set to be released by Washington as part of a prisoner exchange deal. Milka Sadekades reports.
Assalamualaikum. The United States issued a blanket waiver for international banks to transfer $6 billion in frozen Iranian funds from South Korea to Qatar without fear of U.S. sanctions amid an ongoing prisoner swap deal between the Iranians and the Americans. Under the deal, the U.S. will release 5 Iranian citizens as well as $6 billion in frozen funds in exchange for the 5 Americans detained in Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken signed a blanket waiver issuing for international banks to transfer $6 billion in frozen Iranian money from South Korea to Qatar without fear of U.S. sanctions. Washington said Iran can only use the money for humanitarian goods like food and medicine and warned it would monitor and freeze the released funds again if Tehran tried to spend the money in violation of U.S. sanctions. Responding to the warning, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi said that the money acquired from Iran's oil revenues belongs to the Iranian people and the Iranian government, so the Islamic Republic can decide what to do with it. Iran also denied accusations from the United Nations and human rights groups that the Americans were wrongfully detained, noting that they were healthy and were treated humanely. Raisi also urged Kiev to provide the necessary evidence and documents to prove its allegation that Iran is providing Russia with drones being used in the war in Ukraine. Iran previously insisted it had sold drones to Moscow before the start of the war. Barakallahu jami'an kan hada Melchizedek Kadi sa akhbar SMNI Kuwait.
Senator Robin Padilla is calling for the withdrawal of the U.S. Navy's presence in the West Philippine Sea. According to him, their military presence may be perceived as overly aggressive by China, which has its Coast Guard patrolling the disputed territory. Kai Villan reports.
Sir, sagutin niyo po. Simple lang naman po yung tanong ko, Chairman.
Mr.
Inaamin po ba natin na hindi natin kaya? Kailangan natin ng US Navy doon, paikot-ikot.
Senator Robin Padilla expressed concern over the presence of the U.S. Navy patrolling the West Philippine Sea.
Amid escalating tensions between the Philippines and China, Senator Robin Padilla has raised questions about the presence of a U.S. Navy aircraft patrolling the contested territory in the West Philippine Sea. During a Senate hearing in the National Defense Budget, the agency admitted to the presence of Poseidon aircraft from the U.S. Navy. Padilla argued that it would be appropriate to match the Philippine Coast Guard with China's Coast Guard, which also patrols the West Philippine Sea. However, he emphasized that military force should only be deployed during the times of war. The senator warned the tensions between the two countries could worsen if an armed U.S. Navy presence were to confront the Chinese Coast Guard, which is a civilian agency.
Buong mundo may Coast Guard. Okay? Sila ang nagpupulis ng dagat. Ang armed forces, andyan yan paggera na. Huwag natin ibahin kasi ano na tayo ang hirap naman natin na para naman tayong yan hindi naman kayo ang re-respond. Nangyari na po yan sa Scarborough Show sa panahon ng administrasyon dati. Alam naman po natin yung nangyari dyan. Nung naglabas kayo ng gray ship, naglabas na rin ng gray ship ang China, kaya nga nagkaroon ng standoff dyan
To recall, in recent days, a successful resupply mission was conducted for the BRP Sierra Madre, stationed in the West Philippine Sea. The U.S. presence was there at the time, but Department of National Defense Undersecretary Ignacio Madriaga emphasized that the country has the capacity to carry out resupply missions without the assistance of the United States.
Yung presensya po ng Amerikano doon is tulong lang po yun sa maritime domain awareness at parang may eye in the sky na nanonood ng buong pangyayari. Sir, wala po tayong inaamin at hindi po tayo aamin na hindi natin kaya ang trabaho. Medyo kaya may Amerikano o sinong ibang bansa po, kaya po ng Philippine Navy, kaya ng Philippine Coast Guard po yan. Hindi po tayo susuko dyan.
Senator Padilla's concerns are supported by Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa. Senator Bato insisted that the patrol operations conducted by the Philippines, including the U.S. Navy in the West Philippine Sea, should not be given any other interpretation that could be seen as aggressive by China.
Alam natin, it is a universally accepted concept na yung Coast Guard talaga is not part of the military. Kasi mahirap kung magbigay tayo ng gray area for them to misinterpret, overinterpret, or underinterpret. Baka mamaya, dyan magsimula yung problema natin.
Kaya ang gusto ko lamang pong idiin, okay, kaibigan natin ng nandyan sila, maraming salamat, pero wag naman po tayo ibala.
In the end, Senator Padilla called for an increased budget for the Coast Guard to reduce its dependence on foreign assistance. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, Kai Villan, SMNI News.